In this video, we are going to look at some transformations of exponential graphs, and we're going to use the graph to determine how it affects the asymptote as well as the domain and range. So to begin with, let's start with the basic graph of y equals 3 to the x. On my picture, you can see that it is here in red, and so that is the graph. And if you were to have built a table, that you would have gotten particular points such as 0, 1, and 1, 3. So those are particular points that are actually on the graph. And so what we say is that it has a horizontal asymptote of y equals 0. So technically these points along the x-axis or the line y equals 0 are just getting closer and closer, but technically never touching it. Okay, so in terms of our domain, since the graph is going infinitely to the left and infinitely to the right, we say the domain is from negative infinity to positive infinity, or in other words, all real numbers. And then because of that horizontal asymptote, we say that the range is from 0, of course it doesn't touch 0 technically because of that asymptote, to positive infinity. So in other words, the y values are just above up here, so that's why they are positive. Okay, so the first transformation that we're going to look at is in blue. So let me switch my pen. And so you'll notice that on the particular equation, we subtracted 5 from just the x value. Anytime you add or subtract a number to just the x value, it's going to create a horizontal shift. And it is going to be opposite your sign. So it is a horizontal shift, and it is opposite the sign. So if I see a -5, what that means is it technically will move that graph to the right by 5 units. Now, the graph kind of went off of my page here, but you can see in blue, this graph is this one, and then it's going off the page. So in other words, this point that was at 0, 1 is now way over there at 5, 1. It's just off the screen over there. So everything got shifted to the right. So because it only shifted right, it did not change the asymptote. The asymptote is still y equals 0. It did not change the domain. Your domain is still from negative infinity to positive infinity, and it also did not change your range. So your range is still from 0 to infinity. So horizontal shifts are going to leave all of those things the same. Okay, so with the next shift, we are in green, and you'll notice this time that 5 was being subtracted from the entire function of 3 to the x. And so whenever a number is added or subtracted to the entire function, that is going to create a vertical shift, and it is going to be with your sign. So if it's -5, it's going to go down 5. If it were +5, it would go up. So what you can see here is in green. Here's my new graph in green. And again, if you specifically look at, for example, that 0.01, all it did was moved it down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units. So the entire graph went down by 5 units. So obviously if it's going down, it's also moving that asymptote down. So this time, because it went down, we say that our horizontal asymptote is, instead of y equals 0, it's now y equals -5. Now, the domain, as you look left to right on the graph, that has not changed, so that's still from negative infinity to positive infinity. But because the graph got shifted down, our range has changed. And so now the range, your y values are going to be starting close to -5, just not touching it, and then going to infinity. Okay, so then finally in purple, we're going to look at what happens when you put a negative sign in front of the function. And what this does in terms of a transformation is that it actually flips your graph across the horizontal axis. So it flips the graph across, in this case, our x-axis. So since it's flipping across, it's not changing your asymptote. Your asymptote is still y is equal to 0. So notice Here is my purple graph, okay? And so it did not change your domain, so the x's are still going from negative infinity to positive, but it does change your range because of the fact that it got flipped down. What we say now is these y values, since that's going down, are starting at negative infinity, and they are increasing close to 0, or they're getting closer to 0, but they're not touching 0. So my new range would be from negative infinity to 0.